Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Coldar here. Today we are looking at a guide to Dark Animus, and this fight is quite interesting. It's actually very unique in how you do it, and you're mostly fighting a lot of various ads and dealing with them in a cool little way. And so that's really the key to the fight, is the setup, your plan before you actually even pull the boss, how you execute the ads, and all that is the tricky part. When you actually fight the boss itself, that's really the easy part. So in the video, we'll cover mostly how to get set up, possible plans that you can do, how to execute the ads section, and then we'll get to the boss part at the end. So let's get started. So before we get into anything, I just want to briefly touch on the distinction between Anima, the name of the golems that you're fighting here, and Anima as the name of the energy that the golems gain. Both are used throughout the abilities in this fight, and the dungeon journal and all that stuff. And using Anima to describe both is going to be very confusing for this video. So instead, when I say Anima, I'm going to refer to a creature, an Anima golem. And instead of saying Anima for energy, I'll just call it energy. So just get that out of the way. Hopefully that'll be a little less confusing. So it's more clear what I'm talking about when I say Anima and when I say energy. Okay, that's good. So the first thing to briefly touch on is the energy distribution mechanics. So the way this fight essentially works is when you start the encounter and you kill the orb in the center, it will distribute 100 energy evenly among all the small anima golems around the room. So what this actually means is there are 25 small golems, and each of them will gain 4 energy, a max of 4 energy where they start. All other golems, large, massive, and dark, do not get any of the initial distributed energy. They're all at 0. Now throughout the fight, anytime you kill a golem, it will distribute its energy, if it has any, to the nearest golem to it. And this energy is transferred up to the maximum that that golem can hold. So for example, if you kill a small golem, or again just an anima golem they're called, it will distribute 4 energy to whatever other golem is nearest to its location when it died. Secondly, any golem that is inactive upon gaining any form of energy will become active and actually engage and attack the raid. So this means that since you start with all small golems at full energy, anytime you kill a small golem, its energy has to be distributed to one of the larger sized golems, whichever happens to be the nearest. So this could be an actual large golem, it could be a massive, or it could even be Dark Animus. So with the basics of how energy is distributed, now we can briefly talk about what the end goal is, or what the ultimate goal is when you start the final phase and you actually engage Dark Animus. And to describe this, we have to talk about one of his abilities, and we'll just get this out of the way, and then we can go back to the ad setup and all that. So every 6 seconds while fighting Dark Animus, he will use Siphon Anima, and with our naming scheme, we should call it Siphon Energy. This means that every 6 seconds, he drains 1 and only 1 energy from all golems in the room that actually have energy to spare, meaning they aren't drained to 0 already. So the ultimate goal here is to slow the rate that Dark Animus gains that energy throughout the phase. You can do this by limiting the number of golem that have energy when you actually engage Dark Animus. That's the ultimate goal. The fewer golems that are alive with energy, the better. And we can talk about some different ways that you can actually do that, but that's the, what you're trying to go for ultimately. All right, so when you begin the encounter, every time, the layout for the golems will be basically the same. So around the 3 walls, you'll have 25 small Anima Golem, or just referred to as Anima Golem, but I'll call them small ones just for simplicity. So there's 25 of those. Then there are 8 large Anima Golems, 4 on either side, left and right respectively. There are 2 massive Golems, and finally there's Dark Animus. The massive Dark Animus are always in the back wall. Now, as mentioned before, small Animus can hold a maximum of 4 energy each. The large Anima Golems can hold 8 energy each. The massive can hold 36 energy, and Dark Animus can go up to 100. And you obviously do not want Dark Animus to get up to that point, as mentioned before. So the longer you can delay that, the better. So you want to ultimately, as I said, kill as many of the golems as you can that have energy. And that means when you start the fight, all 25 of the small ones have energy. And if you just engage Dark Animus right away, he's going to drain from 24 out of 25 possible targets and basically be full energy in, a matter of 24 seconds. So that's terrible. So instead, you want to distribute that energy from the small golems into the larger ones and eventually a massive one. So let's talk about the way to do that. Now, as you begin, you'll notice that a number of the golems, both the small and the large, are electrostatically charged. And if you click on them, they have a debuff called critically damaged. Now, as you'll read in the debuff, what this basically means is that while the golem can and will still gain energy if distributed to it, it does not engage the raid. So you can use this to your advantage. This is because there's so many golems you can't handle them all in 10-man settings. So you can actually utilize these critically damaged golems and give them energy without having them actually attack the raid. And this means you have fewer things to actively tank when you finally are against Dark Animus himself. Now, normally I like to offer a number of different strategies that are possible for any given fight. But in this case, this is really the only way to go. Anything else is inferior. And the only other method that you can use to even further limit the energy gains of Dark Animus means that you have to tank 2 massive golems at the same time, which is almost completely impossible. You could maybe do it with 3 tanks and 3 healers, but it wouldn't be worth it. You'd gain more DPS and survivability just by doing this method in the first place. So for now, I'm just going to assume this is the only viable method, and we'll go through this one on its own. All right, so I've listed everything down in the bottom there so you can read it. And I'm also going to play this back really slowly so that we have a chance to walk through exactly what we're doing. The first thing you do is assign 1 small golem to each DPS and each healer, and 2 golems each to both your tanks, because there are 12 active golems when you start the fight, the small ones. So you can see I'm pulling my small one. Everyone else has got their own small one assigned, and on the right there, now in front of me, there are 2 golems, small golems, on each tank. Now you kill all 4 of the small golems on both tanks near the pair of large Animus golems that are critically damaged. So if you look on the top there, there's 2 critically damaged golems on this right side of the room. And I think the critical damage targets are random each reset, so they may not be on the right side for you. But whichever side has both of them, your tank should respectively each tank their pair near one and kill both those first. That's what your DPS should focus on. Once those small golem are dead, they'll both distribute their 4 energy to each of the 2 critically damaged large golems, bringing their energy to 8 total, which is where they should sit. But because they're critically damaged, even though they'll soak up the energy, they won't actually engage you. Meanwhile, across the room, the 3rd critically damaged large golem should soak up the energy from 2 other small golems from 2 of your DPS. If you have 2 melee DPS, preferably those 2 players should do it, because they cannot engage in melee with other small golem while they have one on them due to a buff that the golems place on each other. So, just, you can't really see on the screen, but the melee killed their 2 near that large one. So now all 3 critically damaged large ones have full 8 energy. Next step, one of the tanks taunts one of the small golems that's on a DPS or healer, and all DPS kill it near one of the massive golems. So we pulled the one on the right by killing the small golem near it. Now the massive golem is pulled into the middle of the room, and from here, everyone that has a small golem still on them distributes themselves somewhere around the middle, and then we can just freely kill our own golem. When all these small golems die, they will distribute their energy to the nearest non-full golem, which is the massive one. That's what we want. So you can see here, the small golems are all getting fairly low as DPS kill their own in due time. Now, you don't want to stand too close to the massive golem because he does an AE smash. It's not going to be real deadly at this point if it hits a non-tank, so you don't have to worry about it too much, but just be aware that that's what's going on. Some people will get hit if they're a little too close. So there we go. So now, all the small golems that were active on the raid at the start, which is 12 total, are dead. We've distributed all that energy, so now all we have left is the critically damaged golems, and then the large ones and the massive and dark that we didn't activate. So we still have room for 12 energy on the massive golem that is otherwise wasted. And we want to remember the ultimate goal is to distribute that energy to as few golems as possible. So we're going to kill 3 more of the small golems near the massive one. And the easiest way to do this is look for a trio of critically damaged small golems near each other. For us, it was on the back right there by the red marker. So we move the massive golem on top of those. And then because the critically damaged ones have really low health, 170,000, you simply have the tank kill it. He just kills all 3 of those, and the massive will soak the energy. So now the massive has soaked his full 36 energy, and now we are prepared to enter the final phase. That's it. So we will kill the 1 critically damaged Anima golem that's nearest to Dark Animus. So there we killed the one at green. Dark Animus is closest, so he soaks it up, and now the final phase has begun. So that's it. That's the basic setup. You can do that every single time, and that gives you the most control with the fewest golems with active energy, meaning you have the longest time from when Dark Animus is active to when he starts getting higher energy levels, which increases his power and whatnot. I should also briefly mention, as I sort of glossed over it, that these small golems all have the ability to buff each other if they're near each other with an ability called Acceleration Link. So basically, if they are within about 5 yards of each other, this is any small golem, whether it's a critically damaged one or not, they will each gain Acceleration Link, and this increases damage and attack speed by 250% per stack. And this can just keep stacking up. So you have to spread all the small golems out, except for the pairs that are on the tanks. Those tanks should use some cooldowns because the damage is still pretty high on them, but that's the basic idea. Everyone else needs to keep their golems away from each other, because if they get too close, they'll start one-shotting you. If you keep them separated, though, you can heal through the damage pretty easily. They won't melee anybody very hard, so everyone is capable of tanking one, quote, for a while. All right, so now the massive Anima Golem's abilities are very basic. He will use primarily Explosive Slam, and this is cast fairly frequently. It's a small radius AE of about 15 yards, and anyone within that radius will get hit for 175,000 fire damage, as well as get a debuff that increases Explosive Slam damage on them by 50% per stack. And this lasts 25 seconds and can stack up to 10. So this is basically just a mechanic to force tank swaps on the massive golem. So the obvious thing is just to swap between your tanks when an existing slam fades, and then you can taunt off the current tank and then go back and forth like that. It's not a huge amount of damage, and it is fire, so it's not affected by some of the other abilities that you'll talk about for Dark Animus, but just something to keep in mind. The other ability for the massive golem is matter swap, and this is kind of a unique mechanic that seems more confusing than it really is. So when it is cast, it's placed on a random raid member. It does not seem to target tanks, from what we can tell, just melee or ranged or healers. Anyway, when that player gets the debuff, it lasts 12 seconds, and it can be dispelled from magic dispels at any time. When it is dispelled, it will cause that player to swap places with whichever other player is the furthest away from their current position. So, because of this, you can actually force the swapper and the swappee, or the matter swap target and the player that they swap places with, to be the particular players you want. Anyway, when you dispel, in addition to swapping their places, the debuff will also deal damage equal to the matter swap target's health divided among both players. However, this damage is just not halved. Instead, it will start out doing max damage to the target player if you dispel instantly, and as time passes, the percentage of damage that is done to the target player, the matter swap target player, goes down, while the percentage done to the furthest range player, the one that they're going to swap places with, goes up. So it's just a scale that balances from one way to the other. So basically, if you dispel at 6 seconds or half duration, you will get half and half damage, pretty much a normal split. So that's the ideal way to do it. If your healers can figure out a way to easily monitor when matter swap has about 6 seconds left, then dispel at that point. That will be the safest, generally speaking, for both players. Okay, finally, we'll talk about what Dark Animus is up to. Now, a little caveat here is, if you haven't noticed, this video is very chaotic. We make a lot of mistakes, but frankly, this is the first time we'd ever even pushed into the massive phase, let alone seen Dark Animus, having planned ahead. And we still got the kill, so I guess that tells you a little bit about the difficulty and that we're geared well for it, but ignore that part. But the point is that Dark Animus, like I said, is not really the difficult part of this fight. It's getting to this point. So once you see him a couple times, it should all fall into place pretty quickly. You can just kind of stumble your way through it. All right, so with that out of the way, Dark Animus has abilities that he'll use throughout the fight, but most of the time he's just going to gain extra stuff based on his energy levels. And these are basically every 25 energy, he gains a new ability that he'll keep using. And they generally get more and more dangerous until he reaches 100 energy, at which point you die. So maybe not instantly, but very shortly afterward. So the first main ability is Touch of the Animus, and this is not preventable in any way. He just debuffs a random raid member, and they will take 30,000 damage every 4 seconds for the remainder of the fight. So just a way to increase the random damage on the raid as the final phase occurs, or progresses rather. We already talked about how he siphons energy, and that's all leading up to this point, and dictates how quickly he gets into various stages. The next ability is at 25 energy, he will start to use Anima Ring. And this is a ring of spheres that will spawn around the current Dark Animus tank. And any player that touches a sphere will get a stacking buff for 15 seconds that increases physical damage taken by 50%. So we should see him cast this pretty soon here. There it is there right in front of me. It's kind of hard to see. But yeah, all that ring of red bubbles. So if your tank waits in the direct center and all of those collapse onto them, they'll gain, I think it's 10 of them maybe, 10 stacks and just get demolished in white damage. So there's a couple ways to handle that. Again, we're doing it very sloppily, having not seen this before, but ideally what you'd actually want to do is have a non-tank player, so a healer or DPS, step into some of the rings as they spawn, soaking them up and creating a safety gap for that tank to step out. So right there on the right, I should have stepped into some of those circles, soaked them up for our tank, and then he could run out without getting any stacks on him. And that's the ideal way to do it. Of course, any tank that has a way to avoid them and move out is, willing to do that too, or capable. So our monk tank, for example, he was able to teleport out of them. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Try to have someone ready for those Animus rings so your tank does not have to soak them. Now at 50 Anima, or energy, he will gain Anima Font. And this basically is like the corruption ability. It's cast on people that already have Touch of Animus, and it causes them to shoot out bolts that do additional energy toward random players, and it lasts 30 seconds. So this is actually what I die to. A moment ago, actually, I changed the clip, but yeah, basically watch for that. It's kind of difficult to see with what's going on, but you can definitely see it flying through the air toward you, and you can move out of it if you just sidestep in time, and it won't kill you. So again, at 50 energy, watch for that. You watch for those bolts to come from random players. Finally, at 75 energy is the real killer, and this is Interrupting Jolt. So he will cast an AE ability that does about 350,000 nature damage to the entire raid, and it will interrupt any spell casts that are going on at the time. So obviously you want to watch for that cast and stop what you're doing. So we should see a jolt come up pretty soon here as he gets close to 75. There's a ring. All right, here's the jolt. So I stopped casting just in time there, and you can see everybody just gets demolished. We were not prepared. So best thing there is to make sure your healers use cooldowns just prior to that ability hitting. There's a cooldown on it, and you'll know, when he's about to get above 75 to be able to use it. So there's not an exact timer, but just be aware that it can happen once he gets to that point with a guaranteed about 10-second cooldown between. So try to keep everyone topped off just before that's going to hit. And of course, casters stop casting and move around a little bit so you're not taking bolts of the random bolt damage just before that jolt hits as well. Because if you're not full health, the jolt's probably going to kill you. So, and then as I mentioned, once he gets to 100 energy, you're going to die shortly after. So that's the DPS check. Anyway, I think that covers everything. So yeah, Dark Animus is a kind of a cool fight. Again, it's all about the ads and the setup, the order, the positioning when those ads die, getting the energy where it needs to go, and then activating Dark Animus with as few golems as possible. Once you get into him a bit, you should be able to get this fight down pretty shortly after. So good luck, and thanks for watching.